Good morning. Today is Thursday, February 18th, 2016. Good morning, everyone. This is PLAR History Geography here at WASA. Again, my name is Jonathan. I am your teacher for this course. We're at the end of week 2 of this term. A reminder, this is term 2A. Term 2A, where we're together for the next 9 weeks. 9 weeks. So we're back on schedule. It's Thursday, 10 a.m. Central Time, which means 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We're back on schedule. No more class switches at the moment. If that does happen in the future, I will definitely remind everyone. Are there any questions before we begin today? Not much news or announcement to talk about, other than the fact that our Canadian hockey teams, if you're following hockey or been watching hockey, are not doing too well. Montreal Canadiens lost. Calgary Flames lost again last night, so everyone not doing too well. Again, reminder everyone, feel free to listen in, call in, participate. Okay, we're trying to make this course fun and engaging for everyone. So if you're at your learning center or at home, please log on to your Bridget software. Hopefully you can see my smartboard screen. That way you can see these additional slides, illustration, and notes. Again, how to get in touch with me, same as always, feel free to give me a call during my office hours. If you're calling me right now during my office hours, I will not pick up the phone because I am in the studio teaching. So feel free to leave a message and I will get back to you once this class is done. Or you can join me right now and just simply ask your question. Again, feel free to send me your assignments. There's many ways. You can get your DEC to scan it, fax it to me, scan it, email it to me, take a picture with it, and right, so many ways you can submit your assignments. Okay. My cell, call me after my office hours or in the evenings if there are any difficulties. Send me an email, Facebook message. This lesson, like always, will be posted on my YouTube channel and the Wausau archive page. Okay? Any questions? Any questions? Any difficulties? Any comments before we continue where we left off yesterday? Again, feel free to ask any questions or comments at any point throughout my lessons. Alright, if there's no questions or concerns, let's continue where we left off yesterday. Yesterday, we started a new lesson where we looked at and explored Canada and its involvement during the First World War I. Again, we're still on lesson 1. This is the time period between 1914 and 1918. So let's recap some of the slides we covered, and then we'll finish off this lesson. Once we're done this lesson, I will go over questions on assignment number 2. Then we'll start our lesson for today, looking at Canada during the 1920s and 1930s, the next 2 decades. So remember, our learning goals for this lesson were Canada and World War I, the cost of World War I, Prime Minister during this time period, Robert Borden, conscription, where you were forced to go to war, home front, people staying at home, the different battles that took place, and tax or taxes. Okay, so we finished off this one, conscription, bit of battles, and we'll finish things off with taxes and a bit of battles today. Okay, so not much more with this lesson, maybe a few more slides. Again, I'm going to quickly recap what we talked about last class, and then we'll move on. Okay? Reminder, during this time period, especially in European countries, everyone wanted to be the best. Everyone wanted to be big and strong, have power, land ownership. Everyone wanted everything. This was the mindset during this time period where everyone wanted to acquire wealth. want to be the best, want to expand their resources, expand their influence, and build their empire to be big and strong. We talked about what led up to the First World War. It started with Serbian extremists assassinating a man named Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria. That kind of kick-started everything. Then Austria-Hungary, which no longer exists nowadays, attacked Serbia. As a result, Germany announced support for Austria-Hungary. Then Russia announced support for Serbia. Germany then invaded a neutral land, Belgium, on its way to invading France. So again, lots of supporting, lots of invading. Then Britain supported Belgium. Then Britain declared war on Germany on August 4th, 1914. I do notice that we got Fort Hope on their Bridget software, so hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully you can see my screen as well. I have some additional notes, something known as MAIN, capital M, capital A, capital I, and capital N. M stands for military. Again, during this time period, everyone wanted to expand their military, wanted to be big and strong and powerful. A, alliance. Countries started to team up with one another. I'll support you, support me. I have your back, you have my back. I, for imperialism, where again, everyone wanted to be the best. Everyone thought they were the best. Therefore, they wanted to expose everyone to their culture. You must follow my influence. I am better than you are. Therefore, you must follow our political ideologies, social and economics, lifestyle. And N for nationalism, sense of pride for one country. They love the country to death, no matter what happened. Therefore, if they're going to war, citizens will support it. A sense of nationalism and pride. Again, these four factors were really huge, which led to the start of World War One. Again, who fought in World War One? We've got two groups, Triple Alliance, the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy. They fought against the Triple Entente, also known as the Alliance, which consisted of Britain, France, Russia, and Canada. As you know, if Britain was at war, so is Canada. Again, whatever Britain did during this time period, so did Canada. Again, a map of what Europe looked like during this time period. Again, not so many countries in a way, but after World War One in 1918, the way the landscape, the way Europe looked was completely different. I will show that later on. Our Prime Minister, Robert Borden, was our Prime Minister during this time period. He really supported Britain, especially during the war period. However, Canadian citizens, as you recall, did not step up and volunteer to go to battle. As a result, boom, he created something called conscription, where you had to go to war. It was mandatory, compulsory. You had to force all young men aged between 15 to 44, give or take, to go to war. If you're between this age group and you were healthy and meet the requirement, you were shipped off and had to go to war. Again, a lot of French Canadians opposed going to battles. They claimed that it was not their battle, it was Britain's war. Again, conscription was a very controversial issue in terms of Canadian history, where the Canadian government kind of abused their power upon Canadian citizens. Whether you agreed or disagreed, you had no choice. So what if you were a man that did not qualify to go to war? What if you're a man not between the ages of 14 and 44, 15 to 44, give or take? Obviously, you have to stay home back in Canada. This applies to all the women and children. So this is known as the home front. Even though they did not go to war or battle, they still made huge contribution to war. So if obviously all the men going off to overseas and fighting, women took their place in factories where they started to produce food, weapons, clothing, medical supplies. Even children got involved by asking for donation and such. So everyone was involved during this time period, whether you were fighting or not. Canada was a huge part during World War One. Then we talked about the battles. These battles are mentioned in your textbook on page 4 of your textbook, on the top of page 4 in your textbook. So, the first battle was mentioned was the Battle of Ypres. Took place in France. What was significant about this battle, as you recall, Germany used a new deadly weapon known as chlorine gas. This yellowish, greenish cloud gas. If you inhale it and breathe it, it'll burn your eyes, nose, lungs, and eventually you will suffocate to death. The next battle that Canadian fought in was the Battle of Vimy Ridge. Again, this battle was significant because Canadian soldiers fought extremely well. It was our first military victory. As a result, Canada and its soldiers were awarded the 4 Victorian Crosses. Again, just a reminder, there will be a question on battles on assignment 2. Again, name the battles and why it is significant. Okay? Another battle that took place was Battle of Passchendaele. There were other battles as well. Alright, this is where we left off or stopped last class. So what were the battles like? We know the names of the battle and why the battles were significant, but what were the battles like? Well, eventually, men fought in trenches, which is pretty much like a giant hole or piece of land underneath where you dig out. They had to climb in and out of trenches. In between those two trenches is known as no man's land because no one actually controlled that piece of land or had control over it. As you can imagine, battles was not fun. There were bullets, guns firing everywhere in all directions. There were barbed wires set up everywhere. Again, many, close to 10 million, over 9 million people died within those 4-year period. Again, they fought on land, okay, where they're carrying the guns and the tanks and all that. They also fought in the air without planes shooting one another. They also fought on sea with submarines and all that. So huge battle massacre, as you can imagine. Okay, again, a lot of people dying. It was not fun, but it was significant in terms of Canadian history. Next, income war tax. Income war tax. What was the income war tax? Basically, within those 4-year period between 1914 and 1918, as you know, going to war was not cheap. We had to pay for all those tanks, guns, weapons, food, supplies somehow. So what the Canadian government did was that wealthy Canadians were called upon to help to contribute to the war. Hi, Fort Hope. How are you today?
I'm good.
It is Sophia again.
Yes, yeah.
Hi, Sophia. How are you today?
Alright.
You're all right?
Yes, yeah.
I noticed that you're working on your history assignments.
Yes, yeah.
Perfect. So that's great. Good to hear. I think you're on assignment 2 because you asked a question on assignment 2, so hopefully that helped as well.
Assignment 2?
Yeah, you asked a question about assignment 2 yesterday. Are you currently working on your history assignments, and are you on assignment 2 at the moment?
Yes, I am on assignment 2.
Perfect. Good stuff. Do you have any questions about any other questions that you've done so far?
I'm just so stuck on the Question number 2.
Question number
But I
2.
think I got the hang of it though.
What was that? You can't.
I think I'm still on number assignment 2, question 2.
Question 2
But
is
I
that
think
the name the two battles and why it's significant.
yes, yeah.
So I just talked about it, so I'm gonna go back a couple slides. So again, I sent you the video of yesterday's class, and if you watch that video and go to the slide where it says battles, so again, I talked about it just now, and I will repeat it since you're on the line. So there are two key battles that took place during World War One. Again, this is in your textbook on page 4. Okay, there's two battles. Battle number 1, the Battle of Ypres, capital Ypres. The second battle was the Battle of Vimy Ridge, capital Vimy, capital Ride, capital Ridge, Vimy Ridge. Okay, so those are the two battles that were mentioned in your textbook. I talked about it, and your job is to explain why those two battles were significant. What was key or important about those two battles? Okay, it's in your textbook. I just talked about it just now, and it's also I talked about it in yesterday's class. So I just told you the two battles, and now you gotta tell me why those two battles were significant. What was key? What stood out about those two battles? Okay, does that help, Sophia? Hope you're still there, Sophia. Can you hear me? Okay, well, hopefully we'll get in touch again with Sophia, and if she has any more questions, I'll be. Did you hear that, Sophia?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Okay. Hopefully that helped. If you're still stuck, let me know, and I will definitely help you for sure. Okay. So income war tax. Income war tax. Again, going to war is not cheap. Wealthy, rich Canadians were called upon to help contribute to war efforts. The purpose of the income war tax was to help fund for the high cost of war. Again, it was not cheap. So basically, if you're a wealthy Canadian citizen during this time period, you had to pay, tax, something that we pay nowadays, tax, and that tax money will help contribute to the war efforts, to help pay for, food, weapons, supplies, and whatnot. This was supposed to be temporary, okay? It's supposed to be finished once World War One was ended, where the Canadian government was not supposed to tax any more citizens. However, it is still we still have it today, and it's known as income tax. The reason why we have or pay income tax nowadays, or have to do our taxes, or pay income tax, or pay tax in general, was because of this purpose. It was because of this reason of during World War One, where we couldn't afford to pay for the high cost of war, so we as citizens were called upon to help, and we still have it today. Okay, income war tax. It's supposed to be designed to be temporary, not permanently, but we still have it today. The conclusion of World War One. Okay, that pretty much sums up this lesson on World War One. So the conclusion of World War One. Canada and our group of the Triple Entente defeated Germany in a Triple Alliance. Yay, we won. Great stuff. World War One officially ended on November 11th, 1918, was when the war was officially over. Hence why we have something known as today in Canada known as Remembrance Day. Every year on the 11th month of the 11th day of the 11th hour, we celebrate Remembrance Day here in Canada, where we take this time again on the 11th month, on the 11th day of the 11th hour, November 11th. We take a moment where we reflect and thank all the troops, men, women, whoever fought overseas, not just in World War One, but all the battles in general. It could be World War Two, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, or whatnot. Okay, we take that into account and want to think and reflect and say thanks. Okay, that is why Remembrance Day is pretty significant in Canada, why we celebrate it every single year. So if you can see now on my smartboard screen, I have a map of Europe. This map looks different from the map I shown earlier. This is what Europe looks like after World War One. Okay, you can note that there's more countries now. There's more, not just the Triple Entente and Triple Alliance, but there's more countries that were established. So, for example, we have Poland was created, Czechoslovakia was created, okay, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, all those countries were established. Okay, they were created, they were gained independence after World War One. So again, more countries started to emerge. Okay, we had the involvement of not Russia but the USSR. After World War One, there was a treaty. Again, treaty was an agreement, not a law, but an agreement between two parties, so two sides. So the Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28th, 1919, a year after the war was done. In this treaty, in this agreement, there was a guilt cost. There was a guilt cost that blamed Germany for causing the war. Therefore, it imposed heavy penalties on Germany where they had to pay for damages of World War One. They have to give back all the land that was acquired or conquered, all and now allow troops to stay in Germany to oversee them. Hence why, if you go back one slide and look at the map, right, Germany is now much smaller compared to what it was during the start of World War One. It had to give back the land, hence why we have the establishment of Poland, Czechoslovakia, and other nations around the Black Sea. Okay, this was the result of the Treaty of Versailles, and it had the guilt cost in it. The Treaty of Versailles was established by Canada, because Canada was part of Britain, so Britain was involved, France, the United States, tons of countries. The purpose of the Treaty of Versailles in general was they wanted a collective security. They wanted protection, they wanted to have future peace. So with this treaty in mind, hopefully there'll be peace in the future and that there will be no more conflict or war battles. This was the purpose of the Treaty of Versailles. Again, it had a guilt cost in it, blaming Germany for the cost of World War One. Okay? The League of Nations was also created after World War One. It was created by tons of countries, again, Canada, Britain, France, and others. The goal of this organization or this group, the League of Nations, was disarmament, prevent future war, help settle disputes through negotiation. Okay, again, with the help of the League of Nations, where these countries came together and bonded and had an agreement saying we don't want any more future wars. If there's a conflict between two nations, we'll negotiate, we'll talk about it, but hopefully it will not lead to any more battles in the future. This was the goal of the League of Nations. Okay? Again, designed or formed by numerous countries and its goals. So let's look at Canada. Canada's legacy during World War One. Okay? Canada's legacy. Canada had unprecedented volunteer support. Some did, some didn't. Canada also had unprecedented government involvement in Canadian lives. Okay, this was a time period where the Canadian government really stepped into Canadian lives and took control. Hence why there was conscription and the income war tax. The beginning of Canadian social welfare, Britain started to realize it needs Canada. Okay, we're not just a colony of the British Empire, but we start to make a name for ourselves. Canada as a country. Canada signed the Treaty of Versailles as an independent nation, as we talked about. World War One proves Canada as a nation of the world. Okay. Overseas, our soldiers were represented Canada really well. We fought well. There were a huge contribution on the home front, and not all good. Okay, there was still racial prejudice paralyzing new Canadians. Okay, there's lots of racism still going on, which we'll talk about more throughout this course. Okay, but this was Canada's legacy. We're starting to be a country, a nation of its own. We started to emerge away from Britain. Some indigenous content that I want to integrate and plug in during World War One. So status Indians did not join the military. So whether you're a status Indian or First Nation, you were not eligible to join military service. But in 1917, Canada needed more men. So as a result, Aboriginal men were allowed to be enlisted. However, after the war, the contribution to war efforts were ignored after the war. So you can see where this is going, where we said no, where we needed people, so we allowed them to enter, but after the war, we pretty much ignored their efforts. And it was a famous man named Francis Fake Mangabo, was a famous Canadian sniper during World War One, and he was Indigenous. So there was a bit of, and some, First Nation, Indigenous, Aboriginal content that was not really talked about in World War One, but it did happen. It did happen. Okay, so I'm gonna take some time right now, class, to go over assignment 2 questions. Okay, so Sophia in Fort Hope, if you're still working on assignment 2, this is really important to listen to. Okay, so assignment 2 is out of 14 marks. Okay, so not a big assignment, but again, nothing huge. Okay, so question number 1, what was conscription? What was conscription? Again, all these answers are in your textbook, and all these answers I talked about in my lesson. So if you have been listening, paying attention, read your textbook, boom, you should have no problem. Okay, so what was conscription? Okay, so again, if you recall, Canadian government force men ages between 15 to 44 had to go to war, something on the lines of that. Okay, that's out of 2 marks. Okay, remember all answers must be full, complete sentences. Do not just copy from your textbook. Okay, question number 2, Sophia, if you're still stuck on this one, provide the name and some details about each of the 2 battles mentioned in the text that Canadian fought in during World War One. So I need the name of the battle. I'll give you 1 mark each. And some details about each of the battle. Okay. Again, why was the battle significant? What was the name of it? It's in your textbook. It should be highlighted. It should be bolded. Okay. What was significant about each battle? What stood out? What made that battle important? Why should we remember about that battle? Okay. So I'll mark each for the name, and I'll mark each for some details of why it was significant. Okay. 4 marks for that question. 4 marks. Question number 3. Pretty straightforward. Describe the income war tax. Okay. What was the income war tax? Why was it important? So I could say, for example, you could start it be like the income war tax. War. And then tell me your answer. Okay, what was it? What was its purpose? Again, details, include details. I have to have 2 marks. Describe the income war tax. Question number 4. Number 4. What was the guilt cause? Again, just talked about it in today's class. What was the guilt cause? And what did Germany have to do after the war? Okay, 3 marks for that one. Tell me, what was the guilt cause? Where did it come from? What did it say? And what did Germany have to do because of the guilt cause? Okay, Germany had to do something, they had to give up something because of the guilt cause. What was it? Okay, pretty straightforward, pretty straightforward. And your last question, question number 5. Number 5. Describe the League of Nations and its purpose. Describe the League of Nations and its purpose. So that's out of 3 marks. So what was the League of Nations? Who signed it? What was it? And its purpose. Okay. In other words, its goal. What was the benefits of it? What was it designed to do? Okay. Describe the League of Nations and its purpose. Any questions? Does that all make sense, hopefully? Does that make sense, Sophia?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Perfect, good. And again, nothing difficult. I'm not asking for anything lots. Okay. If, again, like I mentioned, if you have been listening, participating, reading your textbook, there should be no problems at all. Again, if you do have problems and you are stuck and you don't know what the question's asking, just ask me. I'm here to help. Okay? Send me an email, give me a call, Facebook me a message. I'm here to help. If you can't find the answer, I'll tell you where the answer is in your textbook. Okay? I'm here to help. I'm here to help. So again, class, assignment 1 can now be completed. Assignment 2 can now be worked on. Okay, so hopefully I'm going to give the class a bit of time near the end of the class to work on these questions. Okay, so I'm going to start today's lesson. I'm going to go through a few slides. I probably won't finish it, but that's okay. And then I'll give the class some time near the end to work on assignment 2. Okay. Are there any questions about Canada and Canada during World War I before we start the next lesson? Okay, so World War I is now finished, done, took place. It finished in 1918, which means that we're starting a brand new decade. Okay, so our next lesson, we're still on lesson number 1. Okay, this is the last lesson in lesson 1. Okay, we're going to talk about Canada, Canadian history still, like always, during Canada in the 1920s and the 1930s, the next 2 decades, okay, the 20s and the 30s. So, let's get through our learning goals for today, for this lesson. Our learning goals for this lesson is we're going to talk about the decade of hope. We're going to talk about the Great Depression. Okay, we're going to talk about challenges and struggles that took place. And once again, we're going to talk about women history. and their involvement. So women and voting, and what were their roles in that? Okay, so these are our learning goals for this lesson. Okay, we're going to talk about the decade of hope, which is 1920s. We'll talk about the Great Depression, which took place in 1930s. Challenges and struggles that took place in this time period. And we're going to talk about, again, women history and their involvement in voting. Okay, these are our topics for today's class and our learning goals. Okay, any questions? Any questions? Again, we'll continue moving on our timeline. We're looking at what took place in Canada during during 1920s and 1930s. Okay, decade of hope, Great Depression, challenges and struggles, and women and voting. The 1920s, 1920s. This time period, this decade was known as the decade of hope. It was a decade of hope. Okay, World War One just ended in 1918. Men came back home to Canada. Families, their wives, their children were happy. Okay, excitement was happening during this decade, during this time period. Prosperity and good times. Okay, a lot of good times, a lot of opportunities started to pop and rise. Okay, the decade of hope was what it was classified as in the 1920s. However, upper class and middle class, so when I talk about upper class and middle class, we're talking about rich, wealthy, in the middle people who had money and good jobs and opportunities. These were known as the upper class and the middle class. Okay, for them, if you're wealthy and had a job and had money, it was exciting times. Okay, it was times of opportunities. However, working class and the poor class, for example, people had to work, dirty jobs, for example, manual labor, or didn't have good source of income. Okay, for these classes, it was time of disappointment, uncertainty, and insecurity. They did not know what the future hold for them during this time period. Okay, again, if you're rich and had money, boom, it was exciting. Things were happening. Technology advancement started to happen. So it was times of excitement, simply because they could afford it. However, if they were a working class or a poor class, time of disappointment, uncertainty, and insecurity. They did not know if they will have money in the future, or they did not know what the future will bring. Okay, so decade of hope, 1920s. 1920s. Let's look at the 1920s. So during this time period of 1920s, there was an increase in industry. So jobs were popping, growing, expanding, urbanization. So cities started to grow. So especially if you live in the city, jobs, homes, employment, factories, all started to expand. We had the growth of a telephone. So Alexander Graham Bell created known as the telephone, something that we still have today, and because of today. Cars, automobile, it was huge. Cars were expanding. I could simply do a whole lesson just talking about cars and an automobile, but we don't have enough time for that. But in terms of cars, companies like Ford, they released new models. Cars had this and had that. So many different features that started to expand. Cars started to have color for the first time ever. So, and because of the automobile industry, it really changed the way we look at society based on, for example, building new roads, enforcing rules and regulations while driving, whether you're a man or female, what a car meant for that specific gender. Tons, just tons. And all this took place in 1920s. Okay, very exciting times for cars. Again, I can talk a whole lesson about cars and automobile, but we just don't have enough time. The radio. The radio was also invented during this time period. Because of the radio, here at Wasta, we can do our lesson through the radio. Okay, this all started in 1920s. Okay, very exciting. Electricity started to expand and produce more energy. Okay, we had advancement and growth in medicine and technology. So again, you can start to see why this decade of the 1920s were classified as a decade of hope. Again, a lot of advancements were created, lots of excitement were happening, especially if you were the upper class and middle class. You could buy a telephone, you could buy a car, you could buy a radio. Okay, exciting times. However, keep in mind that the majority of Canadian society more have-nots than haves. There are more have-nots than haves. So not many people could afford all this technology and this growth. Okay? Some did, especially the wealthy and upper class. Some did, but more have-nots than haves. Just keep that in mind. More have-nots than haves. So I'm going to give some background content. Hopefully it will help expand and shape the way you see things. So I'm going to talk about the understanding Canada in the 1920s. Understanding Canada in the 1920s. There were three categories that I like to put it all into perspective in the 1920s. One, we had new leadership. We have a brand new government. Two, we have a new economy starting to emerge. And number three, we had new attitudes. Canadian citizens had new attitudes. So for the first one, new leadership, you had a brand new government. It started this decade with a prime minister name you may have never ever heard of Arthur Meighen. He was our prime minister for only 1 year. Yep, just 1 year. Arthur Meighen was our prime minister, in the 1920 to 1921. He didn't really last long. Why? Because he favored high tariffs, so high taxes that people had to pay, and he really did not do much about the increasing unemployment that took place after World War One. Okay, man went to battle overseas. As a result, women took their place in factories. When men came back from battles in overseas, they wanted their jobs back. So there started to be a little competition of where the jobs will be. So women want a job, men want a job. So he really ignored the high increase in unemployment. As a result, he only lasted for prime minister for only 1 year. So in 1926, during this decade, there was a Canada customs scandal. Okay, there was a scandal that took place. Prime Minister, or a man named Mackenzie King, he took place as Prime Minister afterwards. So I'm going to cross off his name. So we have Prime Minister Mackenzie King. He was our Prime Minister for majority or most of this decade. He called for an election. The Governor General, Julian Byng, refused. As a result, Arthur Meighen was invited to form government. However, Meighen accepted this role of becoming prime minister, but he refused to take oath as acting government. As a result, there was a non-vote of confidence, which led to Mackenzie King being our prime minister. Hence why Arthur Meighen, a name that you may have never ever heard of, didn't really last long. So Mackenzie King, the man that's on our Canadian $50 bill, the red $50 bill, his face is on it. So Mackenzie King. We'll talk more about Mackenzie King later on. Let's talk about the next one, economy. That new economy during this time period. A new economy. Canada had more goods from the United States than Britain. There was, again, increase in industry, hydroelectric production. There was lots of investment. So especially during this time period, since it was a decade of hope and opportunity, everyone, and I mean everyone, wanted to be rich. Okay, people saw this decade and time period as a chance of hope, chance of opportunity. We had a new government, and everyone wanted to be rich. That was the mindset. Everyone wanted to be rich. New attitudes. This was a pretty unique one. New attitudes. Modern society started to grow. So middle class expanded. So a lot of people started to become a bit more wealthier to an extent. There was improvement in schools, education as well. There was urban growth. So again, cities, like I talked about, cities, towns started to grow. More people started coming. Jobs expanded. Okay. And as a result, something else that took place in this decade was that in 1929, we had a group called the Famous Five. Okay, group of Famous Five led by someone named Nellie McClung, which led to improvement in terms of women history. Women were now recognized as a person. Okay, this case went to the Supreme Court and all that. So before 1929, women were not recognized as a person. As a result, Nellie McClung came and her group of the Famous Five took their case to the Supreme Court, and they won their case, and now women were defined as a person. Okay, so again, there's already some challenges that took place as well during the 1920s. Again, all this information is just some background content that I wanted to add in to give some background content of what Canada was like in the 1920s. Okay, so we had a new leadership, new economy, and new attitudes. Again, these informations are not in your textbook. That is why it is key and beneficial if you come to class so that you can listen and see and hear these knowledges. Okay? So are there any questions? I think I'm going to stop it for today. I'm going to give some class a bit of time right now, and I mean right now, to work on assignment 1 and assignment 2 questions. Okay? I'm online right now. I'm on air. Again, if you have any questions or any difficulties, I'm here to help right now. So take the next few minutes or so, go through your workbook, work on these assignments right now. Try to answer some of these questions. And if you have any difficulties, I'm here. I'm here to help. Okay? I usually don't give much in-class time to work on assignments, and I apologize for that. It's something that I like to do more, especially in this term, instead of me just lecturing all the time. So again, if anyone needs help right now, remember I'm here. Okay? Feel free to talk in the mic. Feel free to type something. Feel free to write something on my screen. But take some time now to answer questions on assignment 1 and assignment 2. Again, assignment 1 is out of 8 marks, and assignment 2 is out of 14 marks. All these questions are nothing new, nothing difficult. Okay, whether you are a new student or an old student, returning student, again, all these materials are exactly the same, okay, in terms of the textbook and the workbook. Are there any questions in Fort Hope, Sophia? Do you have any questions right now?
No, I have no questions right now.
Okay. Are you almost done assignment 2?
Yeah, I'm done assignment 2 now.
You're done assignment 2 now? Alright, that's excellent. It's good. Are you starting assignment 3?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So if you want, I can pull up those questions right now. Again, class, feel free to go at your own pace. If you want to zip through these assignments, you can. That's not a problem. Again, my class and my lesson just gives you additional information besides your textbook. Okay? So, Sophia, if you're on assignment 3, as you can see, is out of 29 big marks. Probably your biggest assignment you have in this course. So, you won't see an assignment that's this big. Probably see something bigger in a geography half later on, but this is probably one of your biggest assignment. So question number 1. Name 3 items after invention that people started to acquire in the 1920s. Does that question make sense, Sophia? So you're naming 3 items that were invented in the 1920s. And then question number 2, Sophia, it talks about what happened or what happened to cause the Great Depression in the late 1920s. And do you think we could ever have another Great Depression? Why or why not? This is kind of like a opinion-based question where you tell me what led to the Great Depression, how it started, and whether or not you think another one could happen. Okay? So it's great to hear that Sophia is on assignment 3, working on this assignment right now, which is great. Again, class, we will finish off this lesson on the 1920s and 1930s next week during week 3, where we'll talk about Canada in the 1920s. We'll talk about the Great Depression. We'll talk about women and the temperance movement and getting a chance right to vote. Okay, we'll finish off this lesson next week. Again, I don't want to rush anything. Again, I want to give the class some time right now to work on this assignment. Okay, the assignment won't take long. Just a few questions. Okay, full complete sentences with details. That's all I'm asking. Okay, that way I can mark it and give you feedback. Okay, but again, next week on Tuesday when we're back together, we'll finish off Canada in the 1920s. Okay, in the meantime, work on whatever assignments you're working on. Again, feel free to zip ahead and just move along. Okay. Again, there's no time frame and no due date or deadline as to when you have to finish these assignments. But again, the faster you can finish these assignments, the fresher the knowledge is in your head, and the chance of doing a test, and eligibility to do the test will be greater, and you'll do much better on the test as well. Okay. So are there any last questions before I call it a day in today's class? Any last questions, comments, concern? Okay. Again, I want to thank everyone for listening and participating. I want to thank Sophia in Fort Hope for asking questions and joining and participating. That's great. Again, please continue to come to class if you have any questions, okay?